Hello, Twitter, Internet, all my wonderful viewers and new viewers. It's been a while since I have posted a new video. The delay was basically to get me to calm down and get people to calm down and to kind of assess a lot of things and where they're going. Most importantly, we were waiting for the nice little announcement regarding Obamacare. Now, for anybody who interacts with me and knows my opinion on things, I was very against Obamacare simply because I have friends in countries that have nationalized medicine. And the Obama plan basically boiled down to two things. And this was things that anybody who knows how private healthcare works, how well it works, how correctly funded it works, knew that Obamacare was going to have problems. First of all, based entirely on the required enrollment cap of, I believe it was 600,000 enrollees in the first year. Here's a problem. Most people already had health plans that covered them better and cheaper than what Obamacare was going to afford, first of all. The government subsidies that Obamacare was going to offer did not offset the cost required to change over, first of all. So there you were already stifling enrollment. Second part of Obamacare, and this was the real glaring part, was the fact that it was basically a tax on the poor. Because if you could not secure health care, you were fined. That is by definition a tax on the poor. Red flag number 2. Now, the third thing, and this was something that everybody who actually sat down and read the core elements of the plan knew was coming. When the enrollment cap was not hit, premiums would be offset to counterbalance the lack of enrollment. Now, what they didn't include, and it's something that just magically decided to come out of the Obama administration, was that, oh, wait, we're just going to increase the subsidies to offset that. Well, hello, red flag number 3. That is now a tax on the middle class. We are now paying a tax for a program the government instilled that nobody asked for that is not working. And this is something, and this is exactly where, excuse my camera, this is exactly where my disdain for Hillary Clinton comes in, because you are now unfortunately going to elect somebody who is basically just going to perpetuate Obamacare with her own little tweaks and God knows what and other horrifying things that she might add to it. But again, hello. This is not the way affordable healthcare, a national healthcare program, is supposed to work. Is what the Republicans want going to work? We've seen how the healthcare industry, which, by the way, basically wrote Obamacare, treats people. Okay, when they're willing to tell chemotherapy patients that, oh, since you can't afford your chemo drugs, here, have a suicide drug. It's cheaper and it's covered by your plan. This is what the healthcare industry in this country treats people like. They will charge you to hold your child. They will charge you $800 for 2 aspirin. They will intentionally send your labs to non-plan laboratories so you get charged up the wazoo for things that you never should have been charged for. And this is the healthcare industry in this country. It's not philanthropic. It's not about curing and saving people. It's not about not having people addicted to opiates. It's about perpetuating this industrialization of healthcare. That's what America does, more so than any country on the planet. Now, do we have really good healthcare? Yeah, of course. We bring burn victims from other countries here to have surgeries. We bring people with life-threatening illnesses here for treatment. Yes, our healthcare system, by default, is excellent. It's how they fund it, basically by ruining people. I mean, if I personally got cancer today, while I'm covered by my insurance, and I'm covered by default by my own state's coverage for cancer victims, I'd still be in an enormous amount of debt based on hospital stays, charges, lab charges, things that aren't covered by the healthcare system that I'm enrolled in. So, a national healthcare system funded basically by a flat tax. And this is where we as a country need to start realizing that taxes are not necessarily bad when they are used for what they are appropriated for. And I'll give an example very clear of this. I live in the state of New Jersey. We have a state transportation fund that funds all road and construction projects in the state. Bridges, tunnels, transit, you know. We recently had a majority approve a 23% gas tax increase to refund the plan. The plan basically drained of funds over the course of the last 10 years, with the proviso that this money was specifically going to be used for bridges, tunnels, infrastructure projects. Well, magically, here we are 3 weeks after, and all of a sudden the leadership of my state goes, well, why don't we use some of that money to extend the hours on the light rail system? No. We did not approve a tax for that purpose. We approved a tax to fix the crumbling roads that we have in our state that destroy people's cars, that create more accidents than anything. We want to fund a link tunnel between Lower Manhattan and New Jersey, which was stopped twice by our own governor due to fear of inflation of cost. And now we're going to blow money on something totally unrelated. We've also had 2 glaring rail disasters in this state due to the fact that we don't have positive stop control for our trains, which was something that the government, the federal government, insisted be done by 2015, and then our state went and begged for an extension to 2018. And see, this is where I do understand people's hesitance for taxes, because taxes by definition are theft. They are. Because you know, especially in this country, when you are taxed, your money is going to go for things you don't want. I didn't want a war in Iraq. My taxes paid for it. I don't want slush projects out in the middle of the desert to build highways that nobody uses or dams that nobody uses. This is where, as a country, we need to acknowledge that our existing democratic infrastructure is flawed. It does not work. It's been circumvented legally and illegally to alter how our money, and it's our money, it's our tax revenue, our hard-earned money, is being misspent. Before there was ever an income tax, Americans were charged, I think it was somewhere around 7% tax, flat tax. That funded everything. It funded our military, it funded our national security, it funded our roads, our trains, everything. We're now taxed somewhere in the realms of about 23%. Now granted, in terms of every industrialized country, it's still the lowest tax base there is. But here's the thing. Of the other industrialized countries, we don't have the malfeasance, misspending, and loss of tax revenue that other countries don't have. Ours is enormous. When your own federal State Department loses $6 billion, regardless of under who it was, $6 billion, that could fund college for every American. It could fund a national healthcare system for, I think it's 5 years or more. This is what people don't understand. It's irregardless of who is president, because the biggest problem in this country is the existing criminal element that lives in our Congress. It's not just elected, it lives there. They have no term limits. They're criminals. They're obviously bought and paid for by God knows how many different interests. And it needs to be taken away. That all needs to be taken away. And I'm not saying destroy democracy. Democracy is a great thing. Come on, people. Nobody is saying, when you get that attack, when you question things about the way our government is run, you get that you're anti-democracy and you're anti-freedom. No, 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 no. We had freedom for over 100 years after we freed ourselves from the British, and government was this big, this big. There was no federal bank. There was no government intrusion into our lives, and the country was great. It ran well. In fact, it was one of the most prosperous times in this country. It was a golden age of invention and exploration and outside of, I know a lot of people are going to bring up, Indians and racism. Let's take that out of the equation for a second, please. Let's be aware of how our country started and the direction that it's headed, because neither of the two people, and this is where I'm going to get political, neither of the two people that are running for office are going to change much. And I'll explain this. It's only recently that Trump has come out and said, well, we need to go after term limits for Congress. Well, think about why he's kind of looking for that, because if he does get elected, he's going to either be facing an all-Republican or an all-Democratic House. That's in there. They're going to impede what he's capable of doing, and at that point, term limits are going to serve him, because if he got reelected for another 4 years, he could deal with a flushed House. But this is where he's right, because look at the obstructionism and the corroboration that went around with Obama. There were rogue Republicans that signed off on the Iran deal. There were rogue Republicans who were obviously bought and sold who signed off on Obamacare. These people need to go. They need to go. But what we also need to implement is a better referendum system that's tied directly to balloting, where, okay, America, here's a simplified national health program, and it needs to be in layman's terms. They can't be doing what they did with Obamacare. Obamacare was 3 times the size of a phone book. Half the people in Congress admitted they didn't read any of it. That needs to stop, first of all. We need a very clear, defined direction for healthcare. Then, the government needs to be very blunt and say, look, what we're going to do is what every industrialized country in this world does. We're going to do a flat 8% tax on everybody. Wealthy, middle class, with exemptions, but flat 8%. What this will then do, and this is kind of what Bernie Sanders was making a point about, is once we install that 8% tax, healthcare will not be paid for by businesses anymore. They will be making more money, or have more fluid amount of money. So then what you can do is, yeah, you can raise the minimum wage to $15, because then even small businesses, which frankly are being strangled to death by overregulation and by healthcare costs. Most small businesses cannot afford to pay more than a handful of people because their healthcare premiums are insane. Insane. A national healthcare system would be so beneficial to the productivity and to the stabilization of this country economically. This is what people do not understand. A lot of people don't get this. All they hear in their ear is tax. So what you do is you insulate the money from this from government hands, period. It's something that should have been done with Social Security. You put in a 100-year clause that keeps the money from being touched by anyone. Anyone. As long as the plan remains solvent, you won't have a problem. But it cannot be run the way Social Security is being run, where every time we have a war or we want to magically stamp down our debt, oh, well, let's suck off Social Security. No, 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 no. This needs to stop. This is where we as a country need to start saying, look, we live in a democracy, but there are things that the general populace wants that our leaders are not doing. Period. Nobody is doing. And this is where, when I look at it, I gotta question, why don't we find this more important? Why are we allowing a circus social media election divide us and blind us from what we really need in this country? We need to stop bantering about the idea, well, this is racist, that's, anti-women. This is a free country. We're not anti-women. We're not anti-Islam. We're about Americans. We're about defending our country. We're about making our country, yeah, great. It is a fairly great country. And for people here who live here, who enjoy the freedoms and the prosperity that this country offers them, for them to turn around and say, oh, no, this country's horrible, it's negative, and it's... Hey, you know what? We have an open door policy. You're free to leave at any point. And I'm not saying, oh, if you hate something, just leave. Because one of the worst things that you see, and this is clearly evident in what's going on in the Middle East, is flight. People fleeing because they don't want to do anything. But what I'm saying is if you are so disenfranchised after 4 generations of your family and your relatives, and you have lived here and enjoyed all the educational, financial, and social freedoms of this country, are still so disenfranchised, please go. Please go. Get out of the way of those of us that want to instill change. Period. Just go. Stop being obstructionists. Stop acting like the people up in Congress that sit on their hands and go, I'm not doing anything because that's not my idea. Get out. Just go. Just go. Get the fuck out of the way. Get out of the way of change, because sometimes change needs to happen, and the people that keep standing in the way of it need to either step aside or get the fuck out. And that's what this country needs fast. Real fast. We need to acknowledge that, no, the world is not perfect. The world is not free, and the world is not safe. And if we're going to continue to use ourselves as a bastion of what the world should consider as freedom, democracy, we need to change some things. Seriously need to change some things. We need to start treating our own people not as second and third class citizens, but as first class citizens. The people who are born here today should not be paying off a national debt, should not live in poverty, should not fear homelessness, should not fear a industrialized medical industry that's going to bankrupt them and make their lives miserable. No, 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 no. And this is what the rest of the world sees. The rest of the world sees our corrupt, financially influenced government. The rest of the world sees social injustice. It's there. The world sees a rogue police force. It's there. It needs to change. Because how can you sit there and banter about to other people in countries that are run by dictators and stuff, well, this is the type of democracy you should want. Wait, what? So you're telling the rest of the world that this degree of malfeasance, mismanagement, and corruption is what they should aspire to? Is it? No. No. No, no, no. What we should be displaying to the world is, if you adopt democracy in its base form, that you will not be persecuted, you will not be profiled, you will not suffer. As long as suffering goes on in this country in any form, we're not a democracy. We're not. Does it require huge amounts of government intervention? No. America as a country has a long-standing history of uplifting its own, and we need to get back to that too. That's something that, especially as of now, the degree of selfishness, and this is what happens when a country is rolling in opulence. We forget where we came from. We started from the bottom, and that's how we got to the top. Arguably, the top. But we struggled, and we uplifted everybody as we went through that struggle, and now we're kind of going, well, I'm making a race to the top, and fuck you. All you down there that kind of missed the bus for whatever reason, fuck you. No, that's not what democracy is. Democracy lifts everybody up as a nation. And yet, this is my core principle. I don't believe in leaving people behind that want to succeed. And that's the thing. You have to want it. You have to want it, and you do have to do a little bit of work. Sitting on welfare for the rest of your life is going to do you no good. Not getting an education is not going to do any good. And this is the other thing. You know, you hear a lot of Republicans banter about school vouchers, but you know what? You shouldn't have to hunt around for a good school. Every school in this country should be stellar. Stellar. And that's the other thing. I don't have children. I don't ever plan on having children. But one of the things that has always irked me is our formulation of how we fund education. Education should not be based on local taxes. Because again, that's a tax on all of the middle class, and it isn't very credibly distributed because the communities that don't have a property tax base suffer. I don't think that just because you were born in a community that doesn't necessarily have an upper middle class base, that your well-being should suffer. There should be a federal formulation for education, period. It's one of those things where it worked when we were an industrialized country, but that's changed. America is never going to be an industrialized country again. As much as people want to believe it, it's never going to happen. We have changed to exactly what Bill Clinton saw, which was a service-based economy. And for us to continue as a country, we need to change the way we formulate how we do things. We cannot rest on business taxes that are punitive. We can't rest on community-based taxes that don't distribute money correctly for education. It needs to be a nationally funded, and we need to realize that these are the people that 30, 40, 50 years down the line are going to run the country. They are going to be the people that find a cure to cancer. The poor kid that's hiding in their bathroom from gunfire, who can't get better than a 6th grade education out of their school system, could be the next person that solves world hunger or cures AIDS. I mean, this is what we need to start really realizing, is we are capping the potential of this country by refusing to acknowledge that there are things that need to be improved. And it comes from this sense that, you know, for a lot of the people that have succeeded and gone on and benefited from a great school system, a great support system, they don't really understand what it's like to not have that. And we need to acknowledge that we don't understand that. We don't live our lives in fear. We don't live in ghettos. We don't hide from criminals. We don't have parents that necessarily, you know, were not well off. So they don't understand what would be needed to put us ahead. I mean, my parents were both high school dropouts, honestly. Well, no, my mom was a high school dropout. My father graduated and went on to a trade school. My correction. This is, you know, it would have been hard for my parents to really understand this, but my parents were very pro-education. My parents made me go to school. My parents made me stay in school. My parents encouraged me to go to college. I was the first person in my family to go to college. There should be more instances like that. And that's where an education formulation, free national college for American citizens, yeah, I completely support that. I really do. But we're not headed there. What we're headed towards is a system that rewards wealth and punishes the poor. So, is that what you want, guys? Leave me some comments and let me know.